Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are moving along with our early off-season preview, taking a look at each of the 30 teams in the league and asking a couple of questions for those teams as we move into the off-season, into the start of free agency and the start of some potential moves being made by those squads as they prepare for the 2023-2024 campaign. So we are swinging things in, swinging things over. Wow, excuse me, to the Western Conference here, talking about the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that, well, made it to the playoffs for sure, and then kind of ran into some trouble once they got there. So we'll take a look at some of the stats for the Clippers first before we get into those questions. They ended the regular season with a 44-38 record. That was enough to get them the 5th seed in the West. They were 3rd in the Pacific Division. Once they reach the playoffs, things do get a little bit rough for them. They go 1-4 in their series against the Suns, and they are eliminated in the first round. So not quite the run that they were hoping for, but we will move on, take a look at some of the other stats here. In terms of offensive rating for the Clippers, they were 16th overall. That is slightly better than their defensive rating, which was sitting at 18th, which gives them a net rating on the lower side of the league at 17th overall. The team played with the 24th highest pace in the league, but had the first highest is not correct. They had the highest payroll in the league overall. That is a little bit of a problem. The money that was committed by the Clippers for a first round exit is not what they wanted by any means. But we'll talk about some of the reasons why that occurred in just a moment. For now, though, we are going to take a little bit of a look at the off-season additions and losses for the team, and we'll get through this one pretty quickly. In terms of additions, a couple of draft picks. They take Kobe Brown and Jordan Miller in the draft. In terms of losses, the only one so far is Eric Gordon. His contract was not guaranteed, so they waived him. They get his $20 million or so off the books. And I think according to some of the tweets when it happened, it's actually going to save them like $110 million in terms of the luxury bill. So I'm not really sure exactly how that math works out, but it was an absolute cost-cutting move here for the Clippers. And, you know, considering they have the highest payroll in the league, one that did kind of feel necessary. But we'll move along here from additions and losses here to the questions for the Clippers. Question number one's a bit of a sad one. That question being, will we ever actually see this team at 100%? Now, when the Clippers first announced the pairing of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard back in 2019, the expectations were that this iteration of the team would do what the former Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan lineup could not, which was get to the conference finals, get to the NBA finals, and finally find success on the game's biggest stage. Now, the previous version of the team was unable to do that. This version of the team so far has not been able to do it either for various reasons, but the main reason is the fact that the team, and that duo of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in particular, simply cannot stay healthy for extended stretches of time. It just seems impossible for them. Paul George missed 26 games this season. Kawhi Leonard missed 30. And the worst part is that the games that they missed weren't even synchronized. They only actually played 38 games together through the entirety of the 23-24 campaign. And across the 4 seasons that they have now been together in Los Angeles, they've only played 142 games together. So you went and got this massive star duo, and you just haven't been able to have them on the same on the court at the same time for as long as you wanted. Now, here's the thing, and the reason why this is sort of still ongoing, the reason why the Clippers haven't pulled the plug on this. In those 38 games that they played together this season, the Clippers went 24-14. So if they were playing together for the course of a whole season, you would assume they'd be winning a lot more games and looking a lot better, which makes it kind of all the more frustrating that we don't get to see the full roster healthy and active all that often. So when they play together, they're great. They just don't really get to play together all that often. Those issues only got worse in the last playoff run. Paul George missed the whole thing. Kawhi Leonard played in just 2 of the team's 5 games in that loss against Phoenix. So there is absolutely no doubt that this squad, this Clippers team, is impressive on paper. They are terrifying if you're just looking up and down their roster on a listing, right? But the games aren't played on paper, right? And that sounds kind of dumb to say, but that's the truth of it. And the inability to have its 2-star players on the court at the same time for a whole season is heartbreaking for the Clippers. Even if you're not a fan of the Clippers, even if you're rooting against them, you got to admit not having your 2 guys available when you were supposed to be building around them is brutal. So as the old saying goes, the best ability is availability, and unfortunately, neither Kawhi Leonard nor Paul George seem to really be available as often as they need to be, and as often as the Clippers had hoped they would be when they went out and got them. So who knows? Maybe this season is different. Maybe this is the season where they're both healthy, the pieces around them don't get hurt either, and we finally get to see what the Clippers at 100% look like. But we've been saying that for 4 seasons now, and it hasn't really come true just yet, so you can't really blame someone for being cynical on that front. But the health of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George hasn't really changed much over the last 4 years, and that leads me into point 2 for the Clippers, which is the Los Angeles Clippers can't really afford to change at all. So long as their star players remain healthy, you would assume that the Clippers believe that their roster has the talent and the experience to make a deep playoff run and maybe even contend for a title. I say they believe that because, again, we haven't gotten to see it. They have not been healthy for that playoff run or for a full season. And all you have to work with is hope right now for the Clippers that scenario plays out, because you don't have really any room to make changes if this version of the roster isn't ready to make that push into title contention. They had the highest payroll in the league last season, and prior to the waiving of Gordon, that payroll was actually expected to increase this season. They had 13 players under contract. 11 of those contracts were guaranteed. One of those non-guaranteed ones was Gordon's, who they have waived, so they now don't have to pay that. But even with his money off the books, they're still over the projected luxury tax threshold. So there's still a lot of money committed here. Still more money than I think the Clippers are comfortable with. But it's kind of too late. The only real way to change this roster right now seems to be via trade. But what trade would they make, right? I mean, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, you would think that they would be untouchable. Of course, that's not technically true. We were hearing some rumors that the Clippers were entertaining offers on Paul George, trying to gauge his value. Whether that is a full commitment to wanting or being willing to move him or not, I'm not really sure. They might just be doing their due diligence and trying to figure out what the sort of gauge of his value would be. But if they're not going to move one of those guys, if it's not a Paul George or a Kawhi Leonard who's going, they don't really have a massive amount of assets to move in terms of draft capital, right? When they made the Paul George trade, they gave away a hell of a lot in terms of their picks to make that happen. So one of 2 things happens here. Either you move Paul George or Kawhi Leonard, in which case you are entirely restructuring almost everything about your lineup, or the trade that you're going to make would involve minimal picks and none of the star players on this roster. But that also means that the guy that you would be bringing back in exchange would probably be helpful, but not a star caliber player. And the deal that you make probably won't take a crazy amount off of that massive tax bill either. So if you look at it from that perspective, if they're not making a massive trade here, there isn't a whole lot of benefit to the Clippers making any sort of move unless something unbelievably good just falls into their laps, right? Because a small trade's probably not going to significantly improve your lineup. That small trade probably also isn't going to get you a hell of a lot of relief from your tax bill situation, so they're kind of stuck for the most part, unless they're willing to move one of the big names. But as of right now, I'm not really sure they're looking to do that. But kind of awkwardly, we'll transition into the third question here. That question for the Clippers is, do they care to or need to address the point guard position? Now, I know I just talked about how they don't have a lot of financial flexibility that is going to play into this, but it's still worth talking about. If both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are fully healthy, then we can reasonably expect the vast majority of the offense to run through one of those two, meaning that the team could sort of afford to focus less on having a point guard whose focus is on ball handling and running the offense, right? They could make do without a guy who is trying to run up his assist numbers. Since the duo wasn't fully healthy last season, we saw the Clippers have to put in some effort into a position that they had kind of been hoping to avoid or pay minimal attention to. So we saw some decent solutions for them. You know, they brought in guys like John Wall. They brought in guys like Russell Westbrook. Didn't really have to pay their full salaries. I think even like Bones Highland was brought in there as well. So they were able to bring guys in who were pushed into significantly less scoring-oriented roles than they might have been used to outside of Bones Highland. He never really scored a crazy amount of points. But guys like John Wall and Russell Westbrook came in and had to deal with the fact that they were going to get far, far fewer shots than they did previously in their career. A similar approach may be needed for the Clippers moving forward because they don't have a whole lot of money to bring someone else in to fill that role if they do need a more traditional point guard. They could still look for a trade. Previously, it would have been maybe Eric Gordon's contract, but since he's now been waived, that's no longer there. But someone like maybe Marcus Morris Sr. could be moved to get yourself a mid-level point guard to sort of fill that gap. They could honestly also just look to maybe have one or more of their shooting guards shift over into that point guard position, someone like Terrence Mann or something. But maybe it's going to be some sort of combination, right? Keep a veteran guy. There's word that they're looking to keep Russell Westbrook, so have him at the point, have one of your shooting guards occasionally shift over to the one, and then hopefully the rest of ball handling duties are handled by a healthy version of Leonard, George, or both. That would be the best possible option here for the Clippers, is that their star players are healthy and then they just don't have to worry about this. But if they do, something needs to be done because you can't go in there with absolutely no one in the point guard position. But that is it for the Clippers. Can they genuinely be healthy and make this massive amount of money that they have invested in this team actually worthwhile, or will it all just sort of fall apart? That is the big question for them. And at this point, they are really starting to run out of time for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I think beyond this season, they have player options for one more, but they'll both have to consider what their long-term future with the Clippers would look like. So this is your last chance with those guys guaranteed to be here to make something finally happen. But we'll see if it actually does happen or not. But that is it for the Clippers. Feel free to share your thoughts on this Clippers team. Is this finally the year that they break through? Will their guys stay healthy? What do you think their solution should be in terms of that ball handling point guard position? Do you think they need to address it? Can they make do with what they've got on the roster already? But yeah, feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.